New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Good afternoon and welcome to Finding the Joy in the Journey. I'm Rev Gina and I am blessed to be here on New Thought Media Network. And I am here today to really have a heart-to-heart conversation with someone that I love and appreciate, and also someone that I have such respect for. You know, we are in this oneness of life. And when we look at the world, sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Finding the joy in the journey is about appreciating who and whose we are. That oneness, that thing called life, that's where joy is found within. So on this show, we always find different aspects, different ways to get to that place of joy, because it's not outside of us. It's not a race. It's not about bigger, better, faster, more, and what to accomplish. It's really about self-actualization and understanding we already have it, but we haven't been appreciating it, or we didn't recognize it because it looks different than we expected it to. So today we are going to talk about oneness. We are going to talk about unity and diversity. We're going to talk about Juneteenth. We're going to talk about love in all aspects of communication within this oneness. And I am so excited to have a brilliant guest to do that with. I can't think of anyone that I'd rather have this conversation with. And I'm so grateful I got the sacred yes. Today, my guest is the beautiful Dr. Tracy Brown. She is a magnificent teacher and author and speaker. She's an amazing woman. She's based out of Dallas, Texas. She is, she's been teaching what seems like forever, throughout New Thought. And her books include Stained Glass Spirit, Becoming Spiritual Community, Where Oneness Does Not Require Sameness, and I Turn to Prayer. She's, again, based out of Dallas, Texas, actively involved as a teacher and leader in CSL Dallas to serve beyond her local community. She has produced or hosted 6 spiritually focused podcasts, including one on this wonderful network we'll tell you about soon, including Say Yes to Spirit and Spiritual Practices That Work. Plus, she's the author of more than a dozen books. Since 1986, when Tracy was introduced to New Thought by Dr. Donald Curtis, she's used universal spiritual principles to infuse her life with peace and joy. She's a former chair of the CSL Leadership Council, recipient of the Ernest Holmes Award, and most recently selected to receive an honorary doctorate degree. Outside of CSL, she's the president of the International Inclusion Incorporated and is recognized nationally as an expert on diversity and inclusion in business organizations. So it's no surprise she founded Stained Glass Spirit, which I can't wait for her to talk about, to provide resources that help navigate the intersection of diversity, spirituality, and inclusion in spiritual communities. In addition to workshops and retreats, Tracy hosts the Intentionally Inclusive podcast specifically to focus on what leaders in spiritual communities should know and do to be inclusive. She challenges church leaders to explore their diversity welcome factor, to examine their inclusion worship factor, so that they can engage congregants and achieve their mission. So I know it may seem like a lot of words, but let me tell you, she does every one of them to the nth degree. She is an absolute wonder, and I am so grateful to have you here. How are you today? And welcome.
Hey, Reverend Gina, I am great. And I'm sitting backstage going, like, really, like, okay, that's enough. Like, they don't need to know all of that.
And you know, I normally shorten them, but you have done some amazing things. And you know, for Centers for Spiritual Living, you are one of the names that I heard of first when I came in the doors. And you're still one of the people that are leading the way on this inclusion in our common language. And that was one of the things we chatted about before even we got on today, is that common language, so we can have that sacred conversation, because it really is my heart speaking to yours.
Yeah, and I do love that in the first few minutes you landed on oneness several times, because we say oneness, but what I've learned is really in the last 10 years, I've learned that everyone, even under the New Thought umbrella, or even under the Centers for Spiritual Living umbrella, or the Unity umbrella, we don't define oneness the same, or we don't interpret it the same. So
I think sometimes we interpret it the same. We just don't act that way.
Well,
so we can say it, we can say the words, but are we living what we're speaking? Are we embodying it on the level of belief? I think
there is definitely a miss or a gap between speaking and doing. But even in the speaking, I hear some people talk about oneness as oneness means we're all the same. Oneness means there's only one of us. Oneness means that there is one, there is one and nothing more. Like, if you talk about diversity, you're talking about duality, because oneness means there's only one. There's only one of us. And there's no room in that, in the belief and the people who are saying that one actually can only be one, because it has the multiplicity of all the diversity and all the different ways that spirit creates. So I find myself often in conversations with people about oneness is really about our connection to spirit. Oneness is our connection to the one source. And each of us is connected to that there is unity between the creator and everything it creates. But what we have in our connection to each other is connection, or the opportunity to demonstrate unity. That oneness is not about my connection to Gina. Oneness is about my connection to spirit.
And we are each individualized expressions. So in the oneness, no one is more important than any other. That's the other part of oneness, that we are all made of stardust. We each are exactly the same, that it's not about anything that seems other than equality in every light is simply the delusion of ego. That we're caught up in this society that has told us whatever. Those are the false beliefs that were created and planted in us And we get a choice to consciously have these conversations of being the love.
Are you trying to convince me that we're not created in a hierarchy of value? That people of one race or one sexual orientation or one age group or one ability group, that are you trying to tell you expect me to believe there's really not a hierarchy of value in different humanity?
And that's why we're here. That is what we are here. And when we speak in these terms, anyone listens. When we speak as love on these common in this language, anyone will listen. And sometimes it gets harder and muckier, and life gets harder and muckier, and it needs to get ugly and truthful. There's no bypass, in my opinion. And at the same time, still viewing through the eyes that are Spirit's eyes.
So, viewing through Spirit's eyes, hearing with Spirit's ears, feeling with Spirit's heart, yes. Compassion, love. And that always makes me think about the Hafez poem, where there are lines in the poem that are about, and what God wants to do is grab you by your ankles and turn you upside down and shake you, right? Because you're pretending that the only way to express Spirit is solemn and quiet and with no disturbing anything. No, Jesus threw the tables upside down in the temple. We are supposed to, if we love, there are times that it is appropriate to upset the apple cart.
Be as little children.
From a place of love.
Yes.
But love is not always sweet and quiet, and no.
If you have kids, you know better. Of any age.
Right. If you're raising children as a parent, fierce love, because you are expecting and demanding the best from and for your child.
And every one of us is our child. Every one of us is our brother, sister, mother, father, child. Every person that I see, I choose consciously, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but that's the prayer, is to be and see each one of these people as, because whether or not they are my brother or sister, they are my brother and sister. Whether or not they are my mom, they're someone's mom, and therefore it's still my mom. And in the knowing, if we respected each other that way, if we could see people with different abilities that way. And one of the things that has been, actually, sometimes we learn through the difficulty the most. And for me, having less ability in different areas of life at times has been that way, that it's easy to say, well, I can't do what that person does. And then realize I'm not supposed to. And realize that, what, I would never say that of anyone else. Why do I use that language with me?
Yes.
So what do I say instead? And work that through because of our teachings.
Yes, yes, and yes. It's scary sometimes when we, as spiritually grounded and spiritually guided people, forget this and participate in the separation by participate in the separation and support the separation by blaming people who are different from us or who are having a different experience from us for having what we perceive to be a negative experience. Example, when people have said to me in the past, well, Tracy, you're just so focused on racism. Racism doesn't exist. And, if you didn't have it in your consciousness, it wouldn't be happening to you, right? Or it wouldn't be happening, but it wouldn't be happening to you. Or when someone who self-identifies in the LGBTQ plus along the spectrum of all the different identities there, and they are told, well, you're choosing something that isn't accepted in society, and so all you have to do is choose something different. So these are really people who have been,
and these are people that mean well. Like, this isn't even someone that's trying to be rude. In their mind, they believe this. And that's why I think that the conversation around this needs to be so open to really allow the unfoldment of truths to be seen, because it can be said about anything that fear of change so often causes people to build a wall. And if you're having this experience and you're saying it to me, you're almost blaming me. Therefore, you must be wrong because I didn't cause this. When you're bringing something up, it's not blaming anyone specifically. It's simply stating, this is my experience. And just because it's not your experience may be right. There is no wrong. How you feel is never wrong. It's how you feel. It's an experience, and we're all different. We're supposed to experience things differently. And there is clearly the evidence of a difference when people are treated differently. And just because they may not be the majority, and sometimes the kicker is sometimes they are the majority. The lower income is much higher of a bracket in this country than the higher income is, by far. And yet still is put down and said it's not that bad. You have politicians talking forever about, not that it's not important, some of the politics out there, but they're not talking about people can't have eggs and bread on their table for kids. They're not talking about the fact that people can't heat their homes because they'd rather be divisive about something other than that. So we are here to be in conversation.
But one of the things that people in New Thought communities often ask me, we're talking in general about, the philosophy and the shift and some of the issues and challenges. But one of the things that people often ask me is like, okay, well, we get that. And we want some tips to actually be able to engage in a healthy conversation or in a conversation or dialogue that leads to change. And so you said something that I often emphasize, and that is when you are creating the questions, let's say you are bringing a group together and you want to discuss any topic that is related to multiplicity or inclusion or oneness. And so it's like when you form the questions or the prompts that you want people to reflect on or to share, the most important thing to do is to make sure that the prompts are are grounded in experience. What has been your experience interacting with people who are different from you? What can you share an experience that you had that shaped your thinking about different socioeconomic groups? Can you share or think of an experience that you had with someone who was much older or much younger than you that started off uncomfortably but ended up creating a great relationship? All of those and dozens of more. I could like go on for 30 minutes with examples, but the point is, when you shape your prompts and your questions around people's experiences, there can never be a wrong answer. There can never be a you're wrong and I'm right, because if I ask you about your experience, Reverend Gina, then you are going to tell me what you have experienced, and my only responses can be, that's interesting. Wow. Thanks for sharing. It has nothing to do with my experience. Now, you're right. I might say, wow, I've never had that experience. But then the conversation goes to, what's the impact of you having that experience? Because how would I know? I've never had that experience. So the mistake that many people make is they try to have these conversations from a place of an assumption that there is a right answer or there is one best answer. And usually, right answer or best answer is based on what we know or have experienced in our own lives. And we're comparing everyone else to our own beliefs, values, and experiences.
A simple example of that: when I was a kid, I grew up in inner city Boston, and I grew up in East Boston. And you know what? I didn't know many Jewish people at all. And I was little and I didn't know any different. So I just assumed there weren't many. And as I've gotten old, I have many friends and it just, the point was, from my perspective, where I lived, I didn't know of them. So there couldn't be many.
Right.
But many of us are still walking through life with those blinders. Well, I didn't know it, so it can't be.
Right.
So we're simply allowing that voice of, and it is for other people in a different way. And it doesn't make your experience wrong. It just means that you weren't in the bigger room.
And let's bring spiritual consciousness and principle into that. So everything you said, and if we know or believe that there's one creator and it is the source of all life, and it has infinite intelligence and creativity, and it has created all that is. So you could say, I grew up in a place where I didn't have any exposure or much exposure to people who are Jewish. But I know that God has created people who are Jewish, and they are wherever they are all around the world, and they own as much right to the world and to expression as I do. So it just, when you think about that, it's like it does keep you from thinking my experience is all of experience. Because there's no way. I mean, the reason I got so fascinated, one of the reasons I got so fascinated about diversity is because from a pretty young age, I was like, oh, let me go see all these other ways that God shows up in the world. Let me be exposed to all kinds of different people created by God. So I can see what I would now say another face of God.
Yeah.
I knew that God was not just people like me in physical form. If
And
God's all the people, all the creatures, all of nature, all of everything that exists, I was fascinated by, from the people perspective, how how does this one source of all life show up in so many, now 8 billion ways? So for me, I'm glad that early on I had that curiosity, and that throughout my life, diversity work has always been spiritual work, religious work for me, from my own curiosity.
that's, I want to get back to the stained glass, as a perspective from that. But before we do, I wanted to make sure, this week is Juneteenth is coming up. Can you explain that? I think it's so important. Can you talk a little bit about Juneteenth and why it's important? And I know, I mean, there's things we were sharing before, and it's not that I don't believe it's important. Of course I do, or I wouldn't be bringing it up. But I'm not going to do it justice, and I'm not going to be able to say it in the way that I believe other people can. So I go to the people that can. For what I don't know, I go to the people that do know, and I can learn from. So, I think it's important that we have the words to use for the common conversation, and that's the divine timing of it.
Great. So yes, Juneteenth, June 19th. Juneteenth is a holiday, became a federal holiday in 2022, but it's been a holiday, or a day of celebration, or a day that has been honored for a really long time, in different parts of the country. But what it represents is that, it represents that that was June 19th in 1865, is when General Granger, representing the federal government, came to Texas and announced, and came to enforce, or to make official, the announcement that people who were enslaved, would now be free. So it wasn't the official end of slavery, but it was the announcement that here in Texas, which was kind of the last place, the furthest west, that had not actually announced and enforced the Emancipation Proclamation. So that's the reason for it, on the quote unquote social, society wide perspective, that it represents the last place where Emancipation Proclamation was shared and made official. And thinking back to the 1860s, keep in mind, right? Keep in mind how communication might go from Philadelphia or DC or the East Coast across the southern states. And so there were people who were aware, but it had not been official since then. What I love about Juneteenth is interesting, because as a Black person in the United States, when I first moved to Texas in 1981, I actually had never heard of Juneteenth, even though it had been honored and recognized since the 1800s in Texas and in many other places. But I had never heard of it. And my first reaction is the first reaction that many have. My first reaction was, why would people in Texas be celebrating that they got the news a year and a half later? Like, right? Why are you happy that you're late to the party? Like, it didn't make sense to me, right? At first. And then I really started reflecting on it. And I was like, no, anytime that freedom is recognized is and affirmed is important. And that was important because it had been resisted for so long, number one. Then as I thought about it even more, I was like, this is also really important because freedom is not something that actually can be granted. It's an inside out thing. It's a principle. It's a spiritual principle. And so I was thinking the announcement and the process of Juneteenth is as much and as important for the people who are white, the people who are politically in power. It's important for them to recognize that Juneteenth is about them recommitting to equality and freedom for all. It's not, oh, we did this. It's not only we did this good thing for the poor Black people who were enslaved. No, I want white people to recognize Juneteenth is a time to say, this is a place in history where we affirmed freedom is the birthright of all people, and that we affirmed it is not right to live with this hierarchy of people based on skin color or cultural background. And it is not just about us having the power to free somebody else. Really, we're freeing ourselves from false beliefs and inaccurate or inappropriate behaviors. So one other story related to that, and it is related to the spiritual aspect of freedom. So a couple of years ago, a group of us were creating a symposium, an online summit or symposium around Juneteenth. And we decided to name it Honoring Freedom. But it was really interesting how often the idea of freedom kept being interpreted based upon human limitations, duality, competition, polarity, and hatred. Like freedom, we got to fight for freedom. And yes, we're angry and okay. And we had to keep going back to, what does freedom mean spiritually?
Yes.
And how do we celebrate that which comes from within us that is already a part of who we are, to live fully as we have been created by our Creator and not accepting anything less?
And not just honoring ourselves, but honoring each one in that way. Each one and the experience of now and the experience of the culture then and now, because there's emotions. That's the thing. That's the thing that really, I think, is sometimes the sticking point, is that there's pain there. And our ancestral pain, it matters, and it's a choice. We can honor that pain, but don't have to be weighed down by it. Part of freedom is to be in the awareness that I don't have to carry anyone's pain. That's when we're stuck in that suffering. That's our choice.
I don't have to carry anyone else's pain, but that doesn't mean I get to ignore.
Absolutely. It's honoring each one as in the oneness. It's so important. I never have the right to ignore or impose or even deny anyone from my experience. So I can't hide myself off, or I could, but we're not meant to hide ourselves off and say, okay, but I'm okay. So I don't realize you, so therefore I'm not doing anything against you. I didn't do it. But if there are blinders on, ignorance is part of that allowance. And that's what keeps things where they are. And when I see others in pain and I do nothing, then I am at fault. And it's not in a blame way, because we know any kind of quote unquote sin is just missing the mark. So we grow in awareness and think differently.
So yeah, I don't know why, but as you were speaking, the name of your show also went through my mind, right? So the journey to joy, and what happens for me is that I believe the journey to joy requires us to deal with, to identify, and then to deconstruct, and then to reconstruct, right? So identify what the barriers to joy are, deconstruct our current way of living so that we remove those barriers and replace them or reconstruct our lives in a way that then demonstrates the joy that we desire. And so if we look at Juneteenth, since we're talking about Juneteenth, and we look at the pattern of racism and patriarchy and militarism and capitalism, and how those fed the way that we were individually and collectively in the US and beyond, all of these factors contributed. And maybe some people were in joy, but not the majority. So if we say we want a society where joy is represented by freedom for all, because we've been saying for several hundred years that those are the values which we stand and build the US upon, then we have to identify and look right at all the things that are the barrier to joy. And then we have to say, what do we want instead? And we've been saying that by these are our values. This is the kind of nation we want to be. But then we have to reconstruct something new. We can't keep defaulting to the behaviors and the beliefs and the structures and the policies that have generated what we don't want. And as spiritually grounded people on the New Thought Media Network, we, more than anybody else or more than most people, know that we do that same process in our individual lives.
Yes.
If you're in 12-step recovery, you identified the what was happening now and chose what you wanted to change. You deconstructed it and deconstruct it every time you go to a meeting, and you consciously reconstruct by following the 12 steps, and your life begins to reflect joy.
And it's a choice. It's not necessarily a have to. We get to make a choice to make things different in our lives and in the lives of those we love and those that we haven't even met yet. If we're going to talk about and preach about oneness, You can't say those words if you're not contributing to oneness. And that is really, there's a separation sometimes between the head, the mouth, and the heart of people. And I think it's not necessarily a malicious thing. It's not even necessarily intentional. It's just what we're used to.
Well, it's the default.
It's
the default.
That's,
and we have to, in order to change to a new default, we have to be intentional.
yes.
And we have to consciously choose. That's the difference. And I hadn't really thought about it this way until just now. But so often when people are saying, oh, but it would be so much work, or when people are saying, as you mentioned earlier, well, my life is good, or I'm okay, and not thinking about your life can't be okay if others' lives are not okay, because we're all connected. But not thinking about that, and it's like, oh, we don't make that connection between change requires all of us to intentionally have different conversations, try new things, learn new things, practice new things in order to deliver a new outcome. It doesn't change if I don't contribute to the change.
And it shows up easily if we're in the flow. It's not work. So when I show up and I honestly say, Spirit, what is mine to do? Show me the way. And I really live in a place of trying to be the love to the best of my ability. I am way imperfect at it. I'm not going to pretend. But when I try to be the love and show me how to, at CSL Greater Boston, show me how to include, how to, not only do I want to be inclusive, I want to be the rainbow that Boston is. I want us to be that love, to represent in that. And every time I vision, it's visioning in that love and being that. It shows up in amazing ways. We now have this partnership with a sister program, basically in Barbados. We started a foundations program this month, the foundations class, and it's showing up in different ways that are just beautiful. And it's not because I'm doing anything and I'm not looking for ways. Spirit, it flows to you what is yours to do. Like this conversation today. I know that I wouldn't do it justice. So I said, who would? Who do I know that when I hear them speak on this, it rings true to me? And I think that's what's really important. If we don't look for the response, but listen for the truth, it can shift so much. We're not looking for something. Every time we hear a conversation, it's not about trying to fix it ourselves, but simply listening for the truth and allowing Spirit to speak through it.
Listening for the truth requires me to listen, to open up, to assume there's more than what I already know.
So much more.
And it's much more comfortable for me to believe I already know everything I need to know. Look how great my life is. I must be doing it right. So I don't need to listen for new information, new instruction, or new inspiration. I think many of us are stuck in that around some topic, if not this one. Right? That's the human pattern.
Well, it's ego. That's the ego. I know best. Ego is always telling us that I know best, and I are, and it's us or them or all of that. That's its job. So we can either be love and we can be the spiritual beings that we are, or we live from the ego perspective. And we live in a society that teaches us that the ego is what's going to keep us alive. And we have part of us that are, we're really raised in that, they're out to get you, or they don't understand. They'll never understand. We're raised with all of these limiting beliefs that no longer serve us. And I am so grateful that we can just shine light on them.
So indulge me, because this keeps coming up for me, and so I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm going to honor that it keeps coming up.
Yep.
So joy,
mm-hmm.
love, peace, even harmony,
inherent qualities of God.
Inherent qualities of God. So I get frustrated, and I own that I get frustrated by my experience with many people who are spiritually grounded, and even just earlier today, I was on Facebook and I was looking at a variety of different sites or different groups. And I just was noticing in all of these spiritually connected groups or spiritually grounded groups, like anytime joy or love or peace, anytime those words were listed, they were always with these images that were, light and soft and pastel colors, and or be a quotation about something really soft and peaceful,
fun, beautiful.
Well, and so I guess it's partly on my mind because of that, but I realize it's coming up for me in this conversation because I get really irritated when I've been asked to work with a group, and they're like, but we teach us how to have these conversations, but make sure that everybody keeps their voice quiet, and
it's got to get messy. It has
no one raises their voice at me, and no one ever. I'm like,
it's got to be messy.
No, and right, joy. When I think of joy, I do think of calm and peaceful energy, but I also think of big, boisterous energy that's, driving audacious and non-conforming behavior, because I have all this joy and I want to share it. It's big.
It's bold.
When I think of love, sure, the whole stereotypes around romantic love.
The greatest love of all is at a time of grief.
Right.
In the ugliness. Right. That's the greatest time when someone needs you the most, is when they are at their weakest, in the ugliest place of their lives, whether it's loss or death or seeming, whatever it may be.
Or you talked about the parent, right? The parent who loves their child and their child is in danger will pick up a car, right? That fierce accountability, that in what may look like aggression,
power,
because they're going to get in front of their daughter before you hit that child, and they're going to fight you because they love the child that they are protecting. Love is fierce.
Let it be messy.
Aggressive.
Yes. Peace. Let it be messy. As long as it's authentic.
I'm going to even challenge the word messy.
Well, let it be authentic. And sometimes, when you have those cries, sometimes they're the ugly cry, and it's okay. Or those laughs that you're crying and it hurts. It's like, let it be messy. Let it be ugly. Let it not look like the world thinks it should. Let it just be. There's no limits.
And there is a chapter in the Stained Glass Spirit book that is multicultural is sometimes messy.
I'm putting that up there just so people can know.
Yeah.
This is actually, and you also have a website. I'm going to put that out there because I meant to speak about this much sooner and we haven't had a chance. So you have 2 sites. They're there. I'm going to leave them there so people can write them down. They can reach you out to you that way, reclaimjoy.com and stainedglassspirit.net. So go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to make sure that.
So there is a chapter in the Stained Glass Spirit book called Multicultural is Sometimes Messy. But and messy in the context of different from the status quo, not messy in the context of out of control or painful, although we do experience pain in letting go of what hasn't worked in the past, and the pain of learning a new way. That's healthy pain. That's healthy.
Transformation is usually not comfortable. Look at a butterfly. Look at the chrysalis.
Yes.
Literally, caterpillar goes to mush. It fights to get out of that cocoon. It's messy, but you know what? It's beautiful, and the freedom that transformation creates is worth it.
The pathway, right? The pathway to transformation is what we're talking about. And so if we're on any journey, it is to move toward that place. As spiritual beings, our journey is about moving toward, constantly, consistently moving toward the place where our mental and physical and emotional and financial priorities are expressing in alignment with our spiritual truth.
I love that you said that, because it's what we pay attention to, what we're giving our time, our energy, and especially our finances to. So if you believe in something, you don't really believe in it unless you're investing in it in some way. So you can say whatever you want, but your actions speak so much louder than words. It's not about being spiritual on Sundays. It's not about saying the right things. It's about living in a way that transforms not just our personal individual experience, but the world for a greater good. It's why we're here. That's the point of, especially science of mind, is that understanding that, we are here to uplift, not just ourselves. It's not about a wish list. It's not about what can I get out of it. It's about who are we, and how do I that rising tide that raises all boats.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about some people who I've been blessed and honored that they selected me, to be their coach, their spiritual coach along the way. And I cannot think of anyone who experienced transformation in their lives who didn't have to navigate looking at the hard truths, looking at all the things and the false beliefs and the old stories that had delivered them to where they were when we started the coaching process, and having to identify, having to name, claim, and admit, oh, if I want something different in my life, then I have to do something different. I have to understand spiritual principle differently. I have to learn some things. I have to practice some things I've never practiced before. And
Here's a novel concept. If I want different, I have to say and do different.
Right. And my faith has to be invested in what I want, not what I don't want. And so, as it relates to diversity and inclusion, whether it's race or religion or physical disabilities or sexual orientation or gender identity or socioeconomic status or climate change or political polarity, if we want to change any and all of those things so that we can experience oneness in the world, then we have to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations, choose different behaviors, learn different solutions, apply those solutions, and we have to learn to do it together with people who are different from us. Otherwise, it will never happen.
Just be love. Let's show up as love today and allow that to show us what the next right step is. And as easy as that sounds, it's a practice that when we start it, once we start that practice, Spirit, let me be love today, and we show up with that genuine intention, the rest flows. Spirit does not make tough work for anyone that goes to meet. It's right within you. There's nowhere to go. So we could speak forever, and it definitely we're at that time that we have to wrap up, and I am so grateful for this conversation and the love that you bring in so many ways, and your poetic way of saying that. And on that note, your poetic way, you have a show here on this beautiful network. New Thought Media Network is so happy to have you. Tuesdays at noon Mountain Time, poetry, prayer, and practice. And I'm so excited that you are here on this network and all that you do. I know you have 6 different podcasts that you work on. God bless you. There's so much going on in your world that I would love to hear about. And we were chatting and time got away from us. But I encourage people to go to your websites, reclaimjoy.com, to get your new book, your newest book, Stained Glass Spirit. Go to stainedglassspirit.net. And there's a lot of tools and ways that people can find out where to begin with some of this. So I encourage people, to remember that you are available to speak, facilitate, lead conferences, and also in the corporate world. So if you're thinking, oh, but my company really needs this, yes, they can reach out to you through these emails. So thank you so much for what you offer here and for sharing this message in the way that you do, that beautiful way that you do, and for how you show up. Are there any... I also encourage you to get the written treatments that you send out weekly, the Treatment Tuesday. So... it's a website of itself, but you're on Facebook and you're on LinkedIn, and people can find you as well. And I encourage them to do that. Any last words, any comments that you'd like to share?
Just one thing. It's hard work, but anything that we are really committed to can be hard work. So I just invite, if you, like me, are committed to transformation happening, so that we can reflect the harmony that is Spirit's intention and create heaven on earth in terms of how people who are different from one another engage with one another, then absolutely, I'd love it if you would reach out to me and become part of my network and allow me to become part of your network. Because we can't do it alone. So,
absolutely. Thank you so much. Let's let it be easy. Let's let it be joyful. Let us celebrate each other. And on this conversation is going to continue this evening on our Sacred Circle at 7. It's going to be actually hosted by Sonia Hart, is a practitioner that works with our community that is wonderful. And she's going to be talking about freedom and celebrating, this oneness, and we'll continue this conversation. And I encourage you, join us. It's on the CSL Greater Boston website, a Facebook page as well. And you can reach me at Gina at cslboston.org. Actually, sorry about that. Gina at cslboston.org is the best way to reach me. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Tracy, for being here with us. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this. And, be the light we wish to see in the world. Yes. Let us celebrate it and know that we can let it be easy and joyful. Let's be that love. Blessings and love. Namaste.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.